A massive multinational military exercise wraps up today at Camp Pendleton before heading to Hawaii.
Every time we make a shift like that technologically, it brings a lot of good and allows people to do things. There's always an impact for a lot of people.
A byproduct of the digital age, a community staple folds after a half a century.
We actually have to dress up as a crane and teach them how to eat, teach them how to drink, and then exercise them daily, just like their parents would in the wild.
And using cosplay and puppets to save a species. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Good evening and thanks for joining us. I'm Ebony Monet. Today, federal officials gathered with local leaders to announce an $8 million grant to help homeless youth. Walter Phillips is CEO of San Diego Youth Services. He says a majority of homeless youth have served time in jail or juvenile hall, and many have recently aged out of foster care. He says the grant will help provide housing and security to this vulnerable population.
Allow us to find out what are those gaps in housing, what are those gaps in services. Mental health is a huge issue for our young people. Substance abuse is a huge issue for our young people. Just being connected to resources, education and employment are significant issues that are causing homelessness in our young people.
San Diego is one of 11 communities across the nation awarded the Housing and Urban Development Grant. The Marines at Pendleton have been drilling with troops from Mexico and Canada. KPBS military reporter Steve Walsh says it's part of a massive exercise that takes place every 2 years. He joins us now from Camp Pendleton to tell us all about it. Steve?
Well, that's right, Ebony. Under President Trump, the U.S. has been calling out its allies, but you wouldn't be able to tell that here at the Rim of the Pacific or the RIMPAC exercises. Now, President Trump has been threatening to pull out of NAFTA, but Canadian-Mexican troops have been on board Camp Pendleton since last week. In fact, Friday, Canadians drilled on Red Beach with the 15th Marine Expeditionary Unit. To talk about it, we've got the Second Lieutenant Cameron Edinburgh with the 15th Marine Expeditionary Unit. So, Lieutenant, tell me a little bit about what we are seeing here today. We saw basically a lot of Canadians coming in from the ocean.
Yes, sir. So today is a culminating exercise here for Rim of the Pacific in Southern California. Our Marines have trained alongside our Canadian and Mexican partners for the past several weeks. And today, Canadians were able to storm the beach inside Marine vehicles, amphibious assault vehicles, while Marines defended this combat town to our right. All
right, so if you spin around here, you can see the beach where they came up on there. And then we'll kind of come around here and take a look at some of the buildings here so what are we seeing over here? This is now I saw a bunch of Canadians coming in and out of here. What were they doing? How did this exercise work?
Yes, sir. So this is a simulated combat town. And so as the Canadians disembarked from the amphibious assault vehicles, they proceeded to rush up the beach. We had Marines set into defensive positions here in this town, in the windows. They had dug in positions in the foothills, and they defended as the Canadians rushed and started clearing room by room.
So what is the value of going through something like this and working with Mexican and Canadian troops specifically?
So it's always a wonderful opportunity when we have a chance to work with our partners. Here in this exercise, we have utilized a crawl, walk, run approach. So we start by learning what we all have to offer, and then we can start building on tactics, techniques, and procedures in order to get the mission accomplished.
But I mean, get in here. I mean, it looks basically like a simulated town in here. You're moving in and out of here. I mean, what do you have to do to train for this?
Yes, sir. This training has been going on for months, even before the forces came to this exercise. Our Marines from 2nd Battalion, 1st Marine Regiment, and the 3rd Amphibian Assault Battalion have been preparing for this for months. Our Canadian forces and Mexican troops have been just wonderful partners to conduct this training.
All right. And so they've moved out. In fact, they moved out just a couple of minutes ago. And so RIMPAC, it happens every 2 years. It stretches from San Diego to Hawaii, but this part of it, the San Diego part of it, pretty much ends up today. The rest of this will go until August 2nd, but it'll be farther out in the Pacific. About 25,000 sailors will participate, 52 ships from 26 countries around the world. All of the U.S.'s major allies are expected. South Korea is sending 3 ships, and all of the NATO allies are expected to participate as well. Reporting from Camp Pendleton, Steve Walsh, KPBS News.
Thank you, Steve. Britain's Queen Elizabeth II welcomed President Trump and First Lady Melania Trump to Windsor Castle today. The Queen and Trump inspected the Guard of Honor before chatting over a cup of tea. And this weekend, Trump will be in Scotland at one of his golf courses where he'll gear up for his one-on-one with Russian President Vladimir Putin. AP reporter Tracy Brown says the agenda for Monday's meeting is not entirely clear.
After tumultuous visits to NATO and the UK, President Donald Trump heads to Helsinki, Finland, for Monday's much-anticipated meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin.
I said I'm going to a few hotspots. We have NATO, then we have the UK, and then we have Putin. And I said Putin may be the easiest of them all.
The seaside capital of Finland, Helsinki, has a long history of hosting high-level diplomatic meetings. In years past, the country serving as a gateway between the communist East and the West.
It's a perfectly good location for them to meet. The real question is, will Donald Trump give a lot of concessions to Vladimir Putin without getting a lot in return?
We'll be talking to President Putin about a number of things.
Trump outlining his agenda for the meeting, including Ukraine, Syria, and nuclear arms control.
We are massively big, and they are very big. And I'll be talking about nuclear proliferation. That would be a great thing if we could do.
Nuclear arms control is the one place where the U.S. and Russia are the two great powers. And so the Russians should want this, the U.S. should want this, and I hope the two leaders will commit to renewed dialogue on arms control.
I'll be looking at Helsinki for a couple of things. One, do they focus on some ways to bring things together? Do they produce a fair deal? Is it clearly in U.S. interests? Do they touch on the major problems between us of most salience? Those are the strategic nuclear questions. Can they get through with the INF Treaty in a set of relationships there which won't undermine the treaty and put us back to an arms race in intermediate nuclear forces?
Trump says a formal one-on-one with Putin could ease tensions in the U.S.-Russia relationship. But plans for such a meeting had been delayed amid the FBI and congressional probes into whether Trump's presidential campaign aides coordinated with Russia to help Trump win the election.
Every move he makes with respect to Russia is seen in the context of the Russian interference in the 2016 presidential election in the United States, and also seen in the context of questions regarding collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russians, and so that makes it a tricky dynamic for him.
Trump has dismissed investigations as a witch hunt and repeatedly cast doubt on the U.S. intelligence community's assessment that Russia tried to help him get elected. Tracy Brown, Associated Press.
I'm Judy Woodruff. Tonight on the NewsHour, a federal grand jury indicts 12 Russian intelligence officers for interfering in the 2016 U.S. election. That's at 7, right after Evening Edition on KPBS.
After more than 50 years, an iconic San Diego store is closing its doors for good. KPBS reporter Matt Hoffman brings us the final chapter of the Adams Avenue bookstore.
The Adams Avenue bookstore is making one of its final sales.
Have a great day.
I've had people now tell me, well, you know, you're closing your store. Does that mean you're going online? No, it doesn't mean that. You know, I mean, I would never, that has no attraction for me at all.
Brian Lucas has owned the bookstore for 32 of its 53-year history. And for him, it hasn't always been about making money.
For us, it's always about creating a culture of books here that I want to get people in the store.
At its peak, the iconic store had over 60,000 books on hundreds of different subjects. But now many of its shelves sit empty.
People think, well, where did this come from? As if we just, you know, I just sat down a month ago and decided, no, this isn't going to work anymore. We've been having these conversations for a number of years.
Lucas says the introduction of online book sales contributed to the store's decline.
Fewer and fewer people read books or journals in the old sense. They read on a device of some sort on a screen. Every time we make a shift like that technologically, you know, it brings a lot of good and allows people to do things. There's always an impact for a lot of people.
The Adams Avenue bookstore used to have many regular customers, but Lucas says those people have stopped showing up.
Year by year, you know, you try to evaluate, see, you know, what's going on, and this section's not selling like it used to, and where are these people? And, you know, we talk to them and just buy stuff online.
After 30 years of running the bookstore, Lucas says he has no regrets.
I mean, I love books, and obviously to do this and to be silly enough to do it this long, but, you know, I love people more. The saddest thing for me is that I'm going to miss a lot of those friendships because they're great people.
The store officially closes on Saturday. Any of their remaining books will be donated to local schools. Lucas does own the building, but plans to sell it within the next couple of months. Matt Hoffman, KPBS News.
More than 3 million people call San Diego and Imperial County home, with 9,000 square miles of space. As part of our KPBS Explore project, we traveled to 5 communities to find out what makes them special. Tonight, we visit National City. Here's the latest from our special series, Where I Come From.
There is no other city like Escondido.
To me, it's like a hidden treasure.
That little nest that's behind, you know, that Valley Center, Palomar, Ramona, that little nest, that's the hidden city.
I'll actually see somebody, you know, maybe, and then I'll say, wow, you look really familiar. What's your last name? And then I'll maybe know the mother. I went to school with the, you know, with the brother.
All those houses have been 100 years old or more, and they're standing as living epitaphs of, you know, people's hard work and the commitment of a community that has withstood a lot of adversity.
You see the generations here because they've never left.
And I think Escondido gets a lot of bad rap. Before it was known as Escondido, which means in Spanish hidden, it was Rincón del Diablo, which means the corner of the devil.
I think there's been an increase in drug or gang activity because some of the bigger cities, they move out to the smaller towns to try to get away from that stuff.
We do have a big problem, you know, and I think gangs is a big problem.
Which doesn't seem to be as evident here, but it's here.
I do think a lot of San Diego's people that are tired of the traffic, no parking, I mean, just the visible stuff that you see San Diego, especially the homeless population, tent city. There's just so many things that are pushing people out of San Diego into the North County.
Maybe the thing that's unique here is that people are getting involved in the situation and no longer sitting back.
If media is here in the community a lot stronger, then it has more people being able to settle down their thoughts and their emotions and how they want to react and respond, believe that they could be heard.
Where I come from, Escondido has captured my heart and made my heart comfortable with Escondido as a home, and comfortable enough to raise a family that I have, you know, and have chosen to help make this a home for them as well.
It's my heart, and so with the good and the bad, I'm here for life.
And once again, this week's featured community was Escondido rather than National City. And you can watch the rest of this series at kpbs.org/where I come from. And we want to hear what you think about the series. Join the conversation on the KPBS Facebook page. Well, this hot weather is going to follow us into the weekend. Regina Miller has more in tonight's forecast.
Well, still dealing with the monsoonal moisture in the upper deserts and into the mountains, the interior mountains here. Now, as we take a look at the satellite and radar imagery, you can see that we do have a little bit of activity, but not too much. It's pushed farther to the east for today, and we do have a coastal flood advisory in effect mainly during high tide, and that is through Saturday night. Now, as we take a look at the metro areas tonight, fog late with an overnight low of 71 degrees. degrees. We're going to see some partly cloudy skies in Borrego Springs, 82 degrees there. Oceanside's at 65 degrees with fog developing around there. And taking a look at our Saturday, most of that monsoonal moisture is pushed back a bit here. So for the San Diego Pride Parade at 11 a.m., peaks of sun. We've got those low clouds, some fog early, but we may see a few breaks, 77 degrees at 11 a.m. Our high temperature for tomorrow in Oceanside is 80 degrees. And we have in San Diego clouds giving way to sunshine, 79 degrees for our daytime high. We'll be at 81 in Mount Laguna. The coastal locations, you're going to see fog giving way to sunshine for Sunday as well at 79 degrees. Fog gives way to sunshine on Monday and Tuesday, and we're in the upper 70s. Inland areas, we have sunshine and warm Saturday, 90. It gets a little more comfortable with partly sunny skies for Sunday and Monday. Mountain locations, we have mostly sunny skies for Saturday at 81. We could see one of those storms popping up here in the mountain areas for Sunday with a high temperature of 80. There could be a thunderstorm around on Monday as well. And in the desert locations, 110, very hot on Saturday and mostly sunny. Partly sunny, 107 for Sunday. And we will start to see those temperatures going down just a bit, but not much. We're still at 105 by Tuesday. I'm Regina Miller, KPBS News.
The San Diego County Water Authority recently launched its popular landscape transformation program. People can get up to $2.75 per square foot of grass they replace. The offer is good for lawns up to 1,500 square feet. Requirements this year include rainwater harvesting, irrigation modifications, and synthetic turf is not allowed. You can see how much you qualify for at SoCalWatersmart.com. A push to get companies like Uber and Lyft to use more electric vehicles is gaining traction in Sacramento. A proposed bill would require ride-hailing services to rack up a certain number of clean miles or miles driven by zero-emission cars. It would increase the requirement incrementally over the next few years. So by 2030, all ride-hailing miles would be clean ones.
The companies would need to make some changes, and that's what we want. We want them to be introducing cleaner cars, giving their drivers incentives to drive cleaner cars, and getting those overall emissions down.
Lyft says it opposes the measure because many of their drivers are low income and will likely not be buying zero-emission vehicles. They also say the state lacks the adequate electric car charging infrastructure. Well, if it walks like a duck and talks like a duck, it's probably a duck. But as AP reporter Stacey Plaisance reports, that doesn't necessarily hold true for whooping cranes.
Once barely escaping extinction, whooping cranes are beginning to thrive again in their native Louisiana habitat. But it takes some creativity to raise chicks for release into the wild, with human caregivers disguising themselves as adult cranes to teach the chicks how to forage.
We don't have as many whooping cranes as we would like in captivity to raise chicks. So the chicks that we're raising for release, we actually have to dress up as a crane and teach them how to eat, teach them how to drink, and then exercise them daily, just like their parents would in the wild.
The birds eat nuts, berries, insects, and fish, and can grow as tall as 5 feet. Lewis is raising chicks hatched from incubators in New Orleans. She uses a puppet head with a movable beak, specially crafted by an artist from Japan.
Our previous puppets did not have a movable beak, so it was very hard to stab a grasshopper or anything and give it to the chick. So this allows us to interact with the chicks so much more. We can actually hand them a piece of food instead of try to roll them a piece of food.
Once numbering more than 10,000 in North America, whooping crane populations dwindled to fewer than 24 in the 1940s. There are now about 500 whoopers in the wild and 160 in captivity, though they're not yet considered safe.
Whooping cranes are native to Louisiana. We used to have them here all over the place, and most people don't even know what they look like anymore, which is rather sad.
But there are signs of progress. The number of cranes has risen by about 1/3 since the early 2000s. And wild cranes in Louisiana are having their best hatching season so far, with 5 chicks foraging in crawfish ponds near the coast.
Once they leave the marsh and find the rice and crawfish agriculture, they tend to love it because it's basically managed as a shallow wetland, which is the exact kind of habitat that they want.
Habitat loss and overhunting nearly drove them to extinction. A comeback would be a win for the species and the environment.
They eat some of the foods and some of the insects and all the fish and things that help keep those balances that we need to in the brackish areas in the seawater.
But it will take time. Chicks aren't counted as part of the flock until they can fly. And at best, yearling cranes have only about a 50% survival rate. Still, efforts are stronger than ever in Louisiana to keep the species alive. Caregivers doing all they can to give these rare birds every chance at survival in the wild. Stacey Plaisance, The Associated Press, New Orleans.
If you're looking for something to do this weekend, you'll find plenty thanks to the start of Pride Weekend. Also, a favorite band returns and an iconic filmmaker is remembered. Here with more is KPBS Arts editor Nina Guerin.
This is one of the busiest months in San Diego for events, and it all kicks off with San Diego Pride. There are parties, shows, and events happening all weekend, but the biggest draw is the Pride Parade and Festival. You'll see so many groups marching, from members of the LGBTQ community to local businesses and politicians. The parade heads to Balboa Park, where there's a 2-day festival that features a performance by 90s R&B group TLC and pop star JoJo. You'll also find informational booths, shopping, food, and lots more. Pink Martini is a band that's not easy to classify. It's a little bit classical, a little bit Latin, and a lot jazz. The Portland-based outfit is influenced by music from around the world, as well as singing greats like Cole Porter and Edith Piaf. But the band puts a modern spin to its sound, thanks to stylish vocals by lead singer China Forbes. And if the name Pink Martini sounds familiar, it might be because it sometimes features vocals by NPR radio host Ari Shapiro. Though don't expect him at this weekend's concert. Finally, Landmark Cinema celebrates the films of Ingmar Bergman with a festival of his most iconic films. The Swedish filmmaker and writer was born 100 years ago this month and is remembered for films that tackled existential topics about spirituality and death. The festival kicks off with the 50th anniversary of the surrealist horror film Hour of the Wolf and continues with favorites like The Seventh Seal, Persona, and Wild Strawberries. Remember to bring your glasses. These films will all be screened in Swedish with English subtitles. For KPBS Arts, I'm Nina Guerin.
Stay up to date on the San Diego art scene with the KPBS Arts Calendar and our arts newsletter. Sign up at kpbs.org/newsletter. Just in time for Pride Weekend, LGBTQ San Diego exhibit is now on display at the San Diego History Center. The curator took KPBS video journalist Chris Arciaga on a tour.
And with changing time and new life experiences come different opinions.
This exhibit is about people who for generations, generation after generation, were persecuted. Eventually they began to form a community. And out of that community, they realized that they had a right to all of the privileges of first-class American citizenship. I'm Lillian Faderman, and I'm the curator of this exhibit in Balboa Park at the San Diego History Center. Many gay people came here to serve in the military, or they came here to work in the defense industry. They came back after the war and they settled here. This was really the beginning of the gay community, and so they began to organize. This was the first public demonstration in San Diego. It began with the social community. It began with bars in various places around San Diego. A lesbian feminist coffee house called Las Hermanas that started here.
We worked hard across the district to support the gay lesbian communities
been tremendous.
First person to succeed in being elected to office in San Diego was Christine Kehoe. She was elected and re-elected and re-elected. Cultural organizations began to form in the 1980s. In 1988, the San Diego Gay Times, later the Gay and Lesbian Times, was founded in San Diego. And in 2012, the Defense Department permitted military personnel to march in uniform in the San Diego Pride Parade. We want to trace that history. We want to show how for so long people had to hide who they were. They had to hide their love. They had to hide the most important parts of their lives, and how they slowly learned to not feel shame. I think we have really succeeded in getting through to large portions of San Diegans that we are your fellow citizens. We have always been here. These are the shoes that Todd Gloria wore in his last campaign. We're fellow San Diegans, and we're not ashamed of who we are. We want you to know and to understand us. And I think over the years it's been happening beautifully.
KPBS is a media sponsor of that exhibit. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night.